So yes, I have been watching Succession. I feel like this is something everybody knew if you've been following me on social media for a while. I've talked about each and every episode as it's been airing. But this is going to be a video specifically about the series finale that just aired earlier today. I'm not going to talk about the entire series as a whole, though overall thoughts on it I will give towards the end of the video. This one is just going to specifically discuss this 1 hour and 24 minute long episode, and it's going to contain full-blown spoilers for how this episode goes down, so if you have not seen it yet, obviously, please do check it out. This is not just a season finale, it's the end of the entire show. And so without further ado, let's get into it. Obviously, the siblings are at an impasse because this deal with Gojo is going down in terms of what Waystar Royco is going to be going forward. And they're going up against Lucas Matson, who doesn't seem to be the entrepreneur that he seems to have been built up to be, and they want to try and cancel the deal in some way. If you remember from a couple of episodes ago, they already had a massive election disaster take place because they had someone very right-wing elected, alt-right almost, pretty much alt-right actually, and eventually that caused a major problem because they were like, well, at least he might get us to block the deal. But at the same time, they're obviously in it for their own selfish gain because at the passing of Logan Roy, anything can be done now. Obviously, this is stuff that Dad would do. And so it leads to a finale episode where it's basically that line in The Wolf of Wall Street. If you remember what I'm talking about, there's a point where Rob Reiner looks towards Leonardo DiCaprio in that the way he's playing Jordan Belfort's father. He says, Jordan, at some point, the chickens come home to roost. And the entire movie, Jordan spends thinking, I don't know what the fuck that means. And then eventually you get to the end and he's like, we got to the end. The chickens came home to roost. That's what happens in this series finale. As the deal is about to go down, they're trying to get enough votes to essentially go the other way. And this involves Kendall talking to Shiv and Roman, and hopefully they can create a vote that could go in that other way. But Shiv is also working with Lucas this entire time, and so Matson is like, alright, we got a thing going on, you can be the US CEO and stuff like that. Meanwhile, her now ex-husband Tom is like, hey, I want in on this too. And so there is a huge dispute happening over who's eventually going to get that position, and long story short, Shiv gets a very sideline treatment as a result, and eventually they're like, we're not going to take her on because, may as well take on the guy who is pretty much an ass kisser and, we can manipulate in whatever way possible, but would probably be a figure in some way too, and that ends up being Tom. This is something that I feel like the entire show, I find that there is no such thing as a happy ending you can give to these characters, but then again, you're not expecting one. All 4 seasons, every single decision that's been made by either of the siblings or either member of this Roy family has been for selfish purposes only. You can preach the name of family however much you want, but at the end of the day, it's about you. How do you come out on top when it comes to those decisions? You could do anything like that. The same thing with Logan. Logan did the same thing. He turned out to be a really shitty dad to pretty much everybody, but at the end of the day, they find some kind of, attachment to him despite all of that. There is this very, emotionally abusive angle to that entire thing. But at the same time, it's not exactly going to be like you're in favor of any of the characters because one character's gain is another character's tremendous loss, or in the case of Succession, multiple characters is significant loss. And he says very early on in episode 2, I believe, he meets his children pretty much one last time, and he tells them that whatever you're planning, you're going against me, trying to block certain things and all that, it's not gonna work. You're not serious people. That's his line. That line haunts the entirety of the season going forward. Eventually, you get to that point where Kendall sees that he's been named the future CEO, but the line doesn't quite go in the straight way. And so there was a huge debate on whether or not his name was underlined or whether it was crossed out. But if you were thinking maybe it was underlined at the end of the day, it's like, I don't know. For all intents and purposes, it probably was, but the fact that it may or may not have been and that doubt that's created in Kendall's mind, that's going to take things forward in disastrous ways. And it leads to them making horrible decisions as they have become co-CEOs, Kendall and Roman. But you do get one nice moment over here. Because of the emotional meltdown that Roman had, he eventually goes over to their mother's place, and there is a bonding moment that happens between the three siblings. One last moment of happiness of sorts, because they decide to come together once Shiv finds out that she's not going to be the US CEO. And as they decide to work together, there's this lovely moment in the kitchen where they're all just goofing around and having a very fun time. And for all intents and purposes, you'd think that's a happy ending. They got, their final moment, and now we can close out the show. We can go on, have a nice day, have a nice night, and all that. But the show is not like that. You're going to have some kind of turmoil and tension. And in the show where you're asking for something to appear authentic, eventually things are going to crack up. And when it comes down to the vote, eventually when they show up at the end, things take a turn. And eventually Shiv realizes that he's becoming more and more like their father was, and you get a very massive confrontation happen between the two of all three of them actually in this moment when the vote is taking place. But it doesn't seem like it's gonna make out in anything, because at the end of the day it seems like Shiv's gone the other way. The moment that you get between them was devastating. The final 15 minutes of the series finale are top tier television. Mark Malone, who directed this episode, he also directed the previous episode and the episode where Logan dies. He's done an outstanding job in this season. And the writing from Jesse Armstrong and the way the actors have brought all of this together is nothing short of remarkable. HBO's had some really, really great shows over the years. I would say this is now going to be officially one of their best ones. If it wasn't cemented before, I think they nailed the series finale that now it's happened. I absolutely loved every second of this, as much as it made me feel terrible. As much as I looked at it and went, you know what? This is horrible. Whatever is going on right now, this sucks. Because it really is not really a winning situation for either party. It seems like there's pros and cons to both situations. If Gojo gets it, then, great for some people, but it's a loss for others. If Waystar manages to keep the deal from being blocked, then there's win for some, there's loss for others. And they're constantly doing this back and forth throughout the entire season. And eventually in this final episode, when things come to a head, and eventually it does bring up that big moment in season 1 where Kendall is like, hey, I remember when you killed someone. That comes up. And it's like, you're not going to be CEO because you killed somebody. And that eventually boils over, and it makes the vote be pushed into the side of Gojo getting it. And so the finale is very somber as a result of that. It's a finale that's not really worked out in favor of anybody. And I think that this was the better way to go about it. Like I said early on, there's no such thing as a happy ending when it came to this. There was no way that you were going to have these characters look back on it and say, you know what, it worked out. It all worked out for the better. We're all good now. That was never going to happen when it came to Succession. In fact, it ends in a way that I think conceptually some shows have tried in the recent past, but what is really good about it is that I figured, it's either going to be one of these guys getting it, or they're all just going to kill each other trying to get it, or no one's getting it. Because Succession, after a while, just became this thing about no one really deserves to be on top. You may as well just take this entire thing down. And eventually what's happened at the end of the show is pretty much the entire thing is gone down. No one actually got Logan's position. No one actually became that big CEO figure, the most powerful person or media conglomerate that you could find at the ends of the earth. That didn't happen. At the end of the day, all three children pretty much lost as much as they could lose. And there's no real winners over here. And it ends exactly on that note, and it ends off the series on that note. And I think when you look at all 4 seasons from the start till this point, and you track the chronological order of events as to how each character has progressed along the way, this seemed like a foregone conclusion. This was going to happen in some way imaginable. And eventually, the fact that it has happened this way, it's heartbreaking, I'm sure, for a lot of fans of the characters, if you were rooting for them. But after a while, realistically speaking, it goes as messily as you can imagine it would. And, there's a lot of thematic handling and messaging in there about just how the simplest thing at the end of the day. It's not about the money. They have enough money. They have enough millions and millions to, sort of live off of for the rest of their lives. It never was about that. It's about character. At the end of the day, it's just about being fucking human and understanding that there are some, things that are beyond leadership and money. It's also about just being fucking there for your family. I'm saying fuck a lot in this video all of a sudden. But you see what my point is, right? Like, at the end of the day, what happens? The siblings, they're not getting along. They try to project this image of, hey, we're all connected, kumbaya and all that shit. But no, really, that's not how that works. And at the end of the day, it falls apart and it leads to the deal not going their way, and Gojo acquires Waystar Royco. And Tom's CEO, the US CEO. Greg's still on, and that's it. So what did I think of the finale? Well, if I haven't made that clear already, I quite loved it. I think it's the best way they could have ended this show. I think it ends in a very poetic way. I think it ends in a way that cements it as one of the best shows that HBO has ever done. And I'm curious to hear what other people have to say about it. Like I said, if you are expecting somewhat of a satisfying closure in terms of one character winning, then you're probably not going to be happy with this finale. But I think as wild as it got, I don't see a better scenario. Guys, thank you very much for watching. I loved this show. I loved, the saga of the Roy family over the years and following it through. Let me know what you guys think about it in the comments down below. As always, if you like this, please do subscribe. Thank you very much for watching, and very happy streaming to you all.